Welcome to the AggroCast. This is Ray Bruels with David Hades Becker. Today we are talking about Summer Games Fest. So, David, what the hell is this thing?
Summer Game Fest. It's a project Jeff Keighley has done in the past, and it was usually one of those little hype up teasers when we were coming up to like E3, because it was carryover from the Game Awards he would do, whereas he would get a couple exclusive things here, but it was more or less it was a hype machine to go, here's why you need to go to E3, or you need to go to this huge gaming event that one of the other publishers or developers is doing, and that's what it started out to be. Now for this year, it has been literally day one of not E3 become a like I think they showed 40 plus games during this live stream they did for about 2.5 hours
Damn.
that they streamed it on Twitch, YouTube, everything else. And it was to show off some world premieres and show off some stuff. But on top of that, it was also to get you hyped for all of the other gaming streams that every other developer and publisher was also going to do, since there was no in-person E3 this year.
So, it sounds like there was a ton of content.
Yes, there was, and like so, the whole thing started off with something I know a lot of people didn't not realize, but didn't expect, because almost a couple of days before we heard there was a cancel, or not a cancellation, but a postponement of a new Prince of Persia game, because they were doing a remake of Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, and the whole show started off with Prince of Persia: Lost Crown, which is a whole new entry into the franchise, and it's taking a whole bunch of elements from all sorts of other games. So it's interesting that they started with that, even though the other one was kind of put on a permanent hiatus. And then they moved into like Mortal Kombat 1. Dead by Daylight showed up. Nicolas Cage is going to be in there, and they actually had Nicolas Cage on stage to talk about it. They hyped up The Witcher season 3, even though I could have swore Henry Cavill was done with it all, but like they featured him front and center, so maybe that's their off sending for him as the character.
My understanding was this was going to be the last season for him, and then it was switching over to Liam Hemsworth.
Gotcha. Okay, which is probably why they featured him so heavily in the trailer. Because after that, it was interesting. They went from Witcher to Witchfire, which is an interesting medieval magic shooter, which I've been excited for, and I've been covering it quite a bit on the site itself. It feels like BioShock if it was set during a medieval witch period. It's cool. And then there's Sonic Superstars, which is more or less a full remake or remaster of the original games in a 3D space. So it's, even though it's a 2D side scroller for a Sonic game, it was a full like 3D perception on all of the characters. They showed off more of Lies of P, which is the new, unfortunately, Death Souls like Pinocchio game that in like a cool steampunk Victorian age. It looks so cool.
Yeah, that sounds pretty awesome.
But unfortunately, it's going to be like Bloodborne, where it sounds awesome, visuals are awesome. I've played the demo. It's a Souls like through and through, and oh, I hate that fucking game mechanic.
Uh, yeah, I love everything about Bloodborne other than playing it.
Yeah, exactly. Everything, even like the comics, everything is amazing. And so, if you haven't checked it out, check out Lies of P. It's like they take the Pinocchio story and they turn it into where Pinocchio, he's already gone through the whole transition where he became a real boy, but he's still half robot. And it's in a whole steampunk era. And Geppetto's been kidnapped, and the Blue Fairy sends him, and he's just this badass warrior. But it's a Souls-like. And I have gameplay coming up on the site soon of the demo, and it's everything about it is amazing. I just hate the gameplay. Yeah, after that, there was a bunch of other things that they showed off there, like Crash Team Rumble. They showed off some new stuff for that. They showed off some stuff for Dying Light 2. I think there's an anime called Sandland that's getting a whole first-person shooter type game with that, done in kind of the Borderlands style of visuals. So it looks amazing. I had no idea, but the small crowd that I was with in where I was watching it, they got all excited. I was lost. And then we move into one of the next bigger things, and it's one of the bigger talking points I tried to bring up in the last podcast we did about them driving the narrative with this thing, and it was Alan Wake 2. And Alan Wake 2 looks amazing, and it's a sequel to a game done by Remedy Entertainment, and I love the game, even though I'm more of a PlayStation player. It was the reason I got an Xbox was to play this game. And now they have the full sequel coming out. And if you remember back to the past podcast, which you might have to go back and listen to about, E3 getting canceled and everything, this is the one title that it felt like they were trying to push the specific narrative on things. And had it not been Remedy, I would have called it out beforehand, because so they show gameplay and they label it as raw, uncut gameplay that everybody's going to experience whenever they play this game. And I'm sitting there, I'm watching it, and it looks creepy. It's awesome. The main character Saga's walking through a forest. She's got her flashlight out, looking around, but it's scripted. Everything is scripted, as if the better way to say it is when you see one of those one take shots that you see in movies and TV, where they have everybody practice it so much that no matter how they they play it out, it's going to play out the same way. So it might as well have been a completely scripted scene as in the game engine running it.
So
And the issue I run
they
into it is
really made it cinematic in the gameplay.
they did, yes, yes. They made it really cinematic and made it feel like you were watching just a normal trailer, even though I guarantee it was also pre-recorded because it was a live stream instead of having somebody sitting there playing it. But when you watch it, they're like, oh yeah, it's live. Somebody's actually playing this. I don't know a single person that would play it to where if you heard a sound go off in the bushes, they'll slowly pan the flashlight over to look at it. Every gamer I know, they're gonna snap to and look over there. Or at one point during the demo, one of the big bads comes out and comes at you with like this giant axe or something like, or giant axe or hammer. And they go slowly running out of the building and they do the smart thing where they kind of put like a park bench between them to kind of like slow them down. But then they slowly take their aim and it's like, you could tell it was very scripted because they still wanted to make it look amazing, but it wasn't raw. I guess to me, it was somebody going through, they had practiced this 90 to 100 times so that it looked great when they presented it to everybody. But people were taking that as that's going to be the definitive experience everybody has, no matter where they're playing this game. And the
That
reason I know that is I've had other people tell me that's how they expect the game to play when it's in their hands and not in the hands of another person.
yeah, that's dishonest.
It is. It is. And like I said, thankfully it's from Remedy Entertainment. And so far, they've been one of the few companies out there that's been completely transparent. And so far, almost all of their titles they put out have lived up to the hype they've built for it. So I'm giving them a pass, but I feel like that's priming people to start thinking that way, which leads into one of the other games that I saw there was a teaser for Assassin's Creed Mirage, which is the next one coming out in October from Ubisoft. Now, for those just listening and haven't been in the gaming industry before, please look it up. But there was something, I don't remember what the internet was called. I want to say it was like Watchdog Gate or something like that because it was like the big thing at the time. During one of the E3s when the first Watch Dogs came out, Ubisoft did the same thing. We're like, this is raw, unedited gameplay. And they had somebody on stage playing it, and you're watching the video, and everybody's like, "Oh, this is amazing," and everything. But then people were rewatching it, and things weren't lining up. And then when more demos came out, what we saw in the very first gameplay, which was the raw, unedited, what we should have seen at the very end, didn't match up to stuff that was coming out just before launch. But people were pre-ordering, spending money and all this stuff beforehand, expecting to get what they saw as the raw, unedited. But then ended up getting, even though Watch Dogs was still a great game, they didn't get what was sold to them. And that's why I feel like it was a priming situation where they're taking this company that's known for never doing this, build this up, and then when you watch stuff for like, even though they didn't do live gameplay during this event, and that took place in the Ubisoft show that took place a couple days later, it kind of sets that in motion where people start thinking all this gameplay they're seeing is live, unedited, raw footage, and now they're going to expect that from other games. And that's kind of the narrative they're driving.
Were there any other games during this Summer Games Fest that did that kind of pushed their own narrative?
Out of the rest of them, not that I can. I mean, Mortal Kombat 1 kind of did, but they actually had Ed Boon on stage talking about it all. So he was actively correcting things as like, as it was coming up. He's like, oh yeah, this is this. Like people were expecting, they have the new, they call it the cameo system, and people were expecting it to be kind of more of a tag team system where you choose two characters, you could swap between them. And he corrected that right out the gate. He's like, no, you choose your character and then you choose another one, and they kind of come in as a special move that you can call kind of like one of the environmental attacks. And there's going to be some that are more akin to the previous Mortal Kombat games. They're not going to be full characters you can play as, but there will be some of those full characters in there. So like he went out of his way to make sure that people were not speculating on the quote unquote raw gameplay they were seeing on screen. But that was the next closest I remember seeing that to coming anywhere near that.
But he corrected their expectation.
Yeah, he corrected the expectation, but I guarantee that was because he was on stage. I don't think if he was on stage, there wouldn't have been anybody there to correct that expectation. And they only had like a couple other people on stage throughout the rest of the event that were there talking about stuff. And most of those were just like, oh yeah, we're just filling the story places here, or we're talking about this here. And it was nothing to where it was like they were trying to make a big selling point on stuff. But the Mortal Kombat one, yeah, he was when people think, oh, I'm going to get a tag team Mortal Kombat, he's like, no, that's not the expectation is set. He pulled that back. And I guess Spider-Man was the other one. They had the developers up there for that. And there was a lot of people talking about his Venom is going to be one of the main characters. And that was a huge speculation online. People were talking about one thing or another. And he's like, no, it's not. Venom is not who you're thinking it is. It's not even going to be Eddie Brock. It's not going to be any of the other Venoms that we've had in the past as well. It's a completely new thing for this game. And which I guess spirals into another thing, which is interesting because Insomniac, who did the first Spider-Man game, they got caught doing the same thing Ubisoft did that I mentioned before. And this one's called Puddlegate. Was during the first Spider-Man, they showed out the first Spider-Man on PS4 and then PS5. There was a bunch of gameplay, and it looked amazing. And like he's swinging around, you see these puddles on the ground and having one-to-one reflections, and everybody was losing their mind because it was on the PS4 at the time, and it was technology that people did not expect to see out there because it was like perfect ray tracing. And then when people were actually playing the game and demo behind the scenes, they were starting to notice that they were no longer there. And then when the game actually came out, that's when it came out that the PS4 couldn't actually run those visuals, and the demo everybody saw in the gameplay that they were expecting was run on a high-end PC that could do it all, which was just the development PC. And it took them, I think it was 6 months to actually patch the PS4 version to include just random puddles, which sounds stupid to talk about, but it was like they were sold this expectation on visual quality, and then the visual quality they got was downgraded for the actual release.
Wow, that's funny.
Yeah. And I mean, thankfully they were out there, and they weren't trying to sell anything. They were trying to lower expectations on just characters and stories. But it's interesting that they were out there, even though not even like, I think it was like 4 or 5 videos before was when they had the Alan Wake one come on and do, oh yeah, this is raw, unedited gameplay. You know, it's going to be that way. It's going to be at the very final game. I'm like, it's not really, but okay.
So there were like 40 or 50 games that they showed.
Oh yeah. And I've only touched on a few. I know on our YouTube and on the website we're going to list all those trailers. We're going to have all the other trailers kind of in a here's everything you might have missed, just in case people weren't able to sit there and live stream the entire event, because it went on for, I mean, it's still going on as of this recording of this podcast. There's still more events going on, and instead of doing it all clustered into a couple days, now they've spread it out over almost 2 weeks of live streams that you have to log in at random times during the week. Like even Summer Games Fest, it took place at 11 a.m. on a Thursday in a period where school is still technically in session for most places, and obviously everybody else should be in the office working. So it's not like the prime time to stream. Like I think there was a few streams that happened over the weekend, but then there's a whole bunch that have happened during the week, during normal business hours, normal school hours.
So you had to specifically go out of your way to catch this thing.
Yeah, so I got invited out to go watch one of the live streams in one of the IMAX theaters here in Las Vegas. And I was also invited to actually go out to LA and be in person. And I opted to not drive out there for a 2-hour event, even though there's a whole bunch going on with all of that stuff I can get into in a little bit. But yeah, I got invited out to watch this in a IMAX theater. And there was, including myself, about 7 people in this giant theater watching on the screen because it was 11 a.m. on a Thursday.
All right, so knowing you, I know there's a rant somewhere inside you about this.
I've been building it up. I have. All right, so here we go.
David
So
has now been aggroed.
I have been aggroed. Now you're going to see the AggroGamer come out here. So I get invited out to go do this live stream because I've opted to not drive out to LA for this 2-hour event that I'm only going to sit in the audience and get to watch. Which, start off the rant, for anybody watching, if you were in the LA area or wanted to make the travel out there, yes, you could have gone to Summer Games Fest. You could have paid for admission, sat in the crowd. But for about 3 to 4 days leading up to this, every casting site that I know about that does like extras or small commercials or anything like that, we're handing out free tickets to do seat fillers so that the audience felt full throughout the entire event. And I bring this up specifically because instead of having a live E3 where you could have had all sorts of fans and all sorts of people from the industry sitting here cheering it on, having a great time, it was in an isolated area that you had to pay for or sit there and watch as a stream outside of. And they built it up as this huge thing of like, oh, we're filled with fans. We have all these people here. It's all great. And I'm like, 50% of those people were hired actors to stand in that crowd. I had the option to take myself and around 11 other people, if I so wanted to go sit in that crowd as seat fillers and potentially get paid to be there. That's my first part of this rant is anybody who thinks the event was specifically for fans in person, it's really not. It's all to sell ads. It's all to sell more video games. And I know it sounds like I'm being a catty bitch or anything like that about this, but that's really what this ended up being, including a point where in the middle of the stream, Jeff Keighley mentions the next Final Fantasy, and everybody gets excited because they think they're going to see the next Final Fantasy thing. And it's him literally to show an ad for Grubhub, live to everybody. And I'm just like, so this is a huge advertisement thing. Moving on from that, we go out and like, okay, so say you can't make it to LA. They're filming it in a bunch of theaters around the country, a bunch of IMAX theaters. So it's like, which is what I ended up doing. Oh, yeah, here's a free ticket. You can go. I think it was like 25, $50 or something like that to go sit in the theater and watch it. That's fine. I went and I showed up. and the ticket says, hey, show up at 11 a.m. because that's when the stream's going to start. I show up at 11 a.m. I'm literally the only person in this quote crowded theater that they report online for the first half hour. At 11 o'clock, the lights dim down. I'm like, okay, it's like a movie's going to start. I'm getting ready, and I'm sitting in the theater for a half hour in complete darkness by myself, nothing on the screen. At this point, a few other people kind of mingle in. And at one point, the max capacity we had in the theater was 7, including myself. But so around 11:30 comes about, and the screen turns on. I'm like, okay, maybe it's going to start now, because I'm like checking my phone to make sure I didn't mess up the times. And according to the ticket, it says 11 o'clock, but then the Twitch stream and the YouTube stream's like, oh, we're going to start at 12. And I'm like, okay, that's really weird, but okay, whatever. Maybe they're running behind. 11:30 comes and the screen pops up, and we see the vertical bars that you see, like the different colored bars with the white and black, red, all that stuff. And we're like, okay, they're getting ready to hit broadcast, sure. And then that loud pitch beat comes on. That whole like, we have no audio, but we're going to play audio anyway. So it's like, beep. I put my headphones in because I'm like, I'm not going to deal with this. And I was like, maybe it's going to take for like 10 seconds, 30 seconds, and I'm going to realize this. No, 20 minutes of this goes on. That is not an exaggeration. I posted a short about it on our YouTube channel. 20 minutes of this goes on. I would have lost my mind not having my earbuds in, cranking my music to its loudest. Finally, 11:50 comes around, and the screen finally changes over, and it's like, oh, the stream's going to start soon, in 10 minutes. And I'm like, all right. So I'm going back and checking the Twitch and YouTube, and they're running all the little lead up to the shows types thing. Like, well, why aren't they playing this in the theater? People have already lost an hour of time that they've paid for, but they're not. So we just sit there in complete silence with the screen just slowly counting down. So I'm just sitting there playing games on my phone, listening to music in my headset, taking little notes in my notebook, just waiting for this to start. And then noon comes around and the whole thing starts. They start going through everything, and the stream goes through, and they make it seem like everybody's cheering everywhere. You see the video of the crowd like cheering on everything. I didn't hear a single peep out of anybody in the crowd outside of when the I think it was Sandland came on, and they were excited because like, oh, we know this anime, and I'm like, I have no clue what this anime is, but good for you guys. That was the only noise I heard the entire time. And then for anybody who watched the stream, it continued and continued, and then they had Anthony Mackie come on, and he started to present Twisted Metal, and I was like, oh, this is what I'm here for. I want to see this. I've loved some of these other trailers. I'm trying to get hyped about this new show for Twisted Metal. He's talking about it. Will Arnett's talking about it. I'm like, let's do this. And then the screen goes dark, and the entire theater all the lights turn on, and everyone just kind of looks at each other like, what the hell happened? So we all go into our phone to make sure like the stream didn't die or whatever. We're looking at it, and the stream keeps going. And one of the other patrons goes out to go talk to the manager, and the manager's like, oh no, they only paid for the theater till this point. We're setting up for the next Spider-Man movie to turn on. So we're going to have you guys clear out here. So we sat in the theater watching the rest of the stream, which was still like 4 or 5 more game trailers and presentations that went on for about another 20 to 30 minutes on our phones, streaming it on Twitch and YouTube, which we could have done from home. Like, it got so bad, I left it. I was like, I didn't pay for this. I got everything I needed. I'm going to go talk about it. I'm going to rant it. It gave me context for this podcast. You're hearing me rant right now. And I left. But I watched this people who paid for this go and demand refunds because they wasted an hour getting there, and then they lost the last half hour where they could have been watching it on their phone, all because of whatever was going on when they were trying to stream it, and they didn't contact anybody to let them know what was going on.
What a cluster.
Yeah. And I guarantee if anybody rewatches the YouTube or Twitch restreams of it all, you're not going to see any of this stuff because you get to see what was live recorded, and that's what they're going to replace out there instead of actually showing what happened during the actual live stream.
Yeah, they're going to curate that experience.
Exactly. Because there was even a point, I think, I got to see live, and it was when Nick Cage came on to talk about him being in Dead by Daylight, he was getting ready to leave, and he looked confused, like he didn't know where to go, and the camera lingered on him for like a couple extra seconds because he's like, okay, and he's like pointing to figure out which way to go because nobody gave him direction on where to leave. And you would think this would have been a meme, kind of like the whole John Travolta, like, where do I go type meme, because it literally looked like Nick Cage was doing that because he was confused on where to go after doing his presentation. I ain't seen any of that stuff, which means any of the restreams that have been out there, nobody's caught that yet. And I'm almost certain because it's been, like you said, edited and curated specifically to show the highlight. And this unfortunately feels like it's going to be the way it's going to keep going moving forward, because even though there are other podcasts in themselves, if you've watched any of the other streams that have gone on for like Xbox or Ubisoft or Square Enix or any of the other ones, they all kind of follow the same suit. And instead of having true fans there, or even showing off the game to people who want to actually experience, or anybody who's not in the top 5 media outlets, give them a chance to actually experience this stuff. It's not going to happen outside of having an in-person E3. Like I know Mortal Kombat 1 was out there and they were having behind closed doors viewings for certain media outlets, which were not us. And like, any of my press contacts wouldn't even get back to me on whether or not I could even just show up and check them out, because it was literally the big ones out there and nobody else. Whereas if it was an in-person E3, they would have found a way to sneak me into the thing, or even just make a side appointment to be like, yeah, you can come by, even though you're not a main outlet. We still want to get as many people's hands-on and eyes and impressions out there, not only just to obviously help the marketing. Me talking about a game is obviously just going to be marketing in the first place, but to also get kind of feedback from people instead of being in an echo chamber. And it was the same thing I watched with Alan Wake. All of the social media channels for Remedy Entertainment, the Alan Wake channel, and even Sam Lake, the guy who wrote the game and is the game director. It was all like, oh, we had so many people out there checking this out. And you only get to see like 4 or 5 outlets that were there actually invited to this behind closed doors thing, instead of seeing the 50 to 100 that you normally get. And not only that, 50 to 100 that are global instead of local. There's been many times in the past I've gone to E3 where I'm sitting in there and there's some small time guy from like Germany or somebody from the UK somewhere that they flew out to E3 to cover this stuff so they can go back and do it all. I also guarantee these people, unless they live in the town where that developer or publisher are, they're not going to get any of this hands-on that they would normally get, and it's all going to be this driven media through these specific companies that they know they can manhandle or know are already on board to share whatever vision or narrative they want to put out there.
So they've really discounting grassroots marketing and the everyman, which in a lot of ways that's what AggroGamer tries to embody, is the everyman gamer for these
Yeah,
corporate
exactly.
media.
That is exactly it. Like I was at a gaming shop a couple of days ago recently, just after all this stuff went down, and I was talking to somebody, and their very first E3 they got to go to in person was the one in 2019, which is obviously the last in-person E3, and I think it was the second or third one they actually allowed non-industry or non-media to go to, so like any gamer could show like pay their money and go and actually experience stuff. And they were so hyped about having the chance to go do that. And even this year, they were unaware anything was going on because E3 was canceled. And now all they know is there's trailers that are getting dumped out there, and they don't know that there's this thing going on. And they're taking things at face value. And that's kind of the way it feels like even my nephew, he's another one that came up. Like there was a game that got showed, he got overly hyped for it, and I had to explain to him that's not gameplay, that's a scripted scene that you saw, and I can't confirm or deny that's how it's going to be at your final at the final build. Had it been like maybe Alan Wake, I could have maybe came close to it, but I want to say it was the new Star Wars game from Ubisoft that's coming out,
Are the
which is the
Outlaws?
first Star Wars game. Yeah, Outlaws, yeah. Which is the first Star Wars game that hasn't been done by EA. And while, yes, it looks impressive, I don't know a single person in any of my inner or outer circles for the media or press contacts that have had a chance to get hands-on with it. Everybody just has the curated video we got to see and the curated gameplay we got to see. Whereas if we had an in-person E3, if they were ready to show any of that, they would have showed the trailer so that anybody who couldn't make it to the event could, look at it and all that stuff, but then be like, oh yeah, you can come over here, and if you have a media appointment, hop right in and play the game, where you could stand in this line over here for an hour or two to actually play it. So they can get dedicated fans to have it in their hands and actually be like, oh, this game's amazing, or oh, this game is crap, right out the gate. And then on top of that, if it is crap, go to the developer who should be right there on site to go, here's how to change this, and here's what here's what you should think about her. This is what I liked and didn't like. So that it's almost like getting focus groups that they're paying to be a focus group for. But
Yeah,
we're not doing that anymore.
because you get that immediate feedback.
Well, like CD Projekt Red, so I did it multiple times for Cyberpunk, which I know that is a game that everybody still, even though it's gotten much better and the new DLC looks really, really cool. Every year for the 5 years it was in development, and they were showing it off at E3, before you could leave the press event or even pick up any of the swag they were giving out, they gave you a survey and they required you to fill it out so that the developers could take that and go work on it. And they did that for The Witcher, like Witcher 3. I remember filling that out for The Witcher 3. I remember filling it out for Gwent. And they would do that constantly, where it's like, you're here as media, you're here to look at this cool stuff, and yes, we're giving you swag, but we also want actual feedback from gamers to be like, oh yeah, this part sucks, or maybe you should change this, or this didn't make any sense, or maybe you should fix this here. And they didn't get that live right there from fans and people in the industry. Whereas right now, they're getting it from effectively yes men.
Well, and you said that this was kind of the way you expected things to go. And sadly, we are now seeing the proof in the pudding, as they say, that you were right
Yeah.
on the money with it.
Yeah. I didn't I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to be wrong so much. And mind you, this I'm just talking mainly about Summer Game Fest and what they showed there, but we've had so many other streams go on, and I'm still, as of right now, going through all the rest of the content because I'm only one person. The team, we have a small team, so we can only do so much. And there's been so much dropped out there that it's hard to keep up. But I guarantee as we keep going through all this stuff, we're gonna see more and more stuff out there that comes up and goes, here's a red flag, here's a red flag. Like, so even though it wasn't part of Summer Game Fest, I'll bring it up. Starfield. Starfield was, because that was the one thing that triggered to me E3 was done. And that was when, or at least done for this year. And that was when Microsoft announced they were going to do a Starfield specific stream on the 11th or 12th of January, which would have been the day before E3 happened. And to their credit, Microsoft still did that. They showed it all off, but it felt almost like it was another Fallout 76 type stream. And since there was nobody there to could actually prove it one way or another, you're just getting fed this by the developer. It felt like that's where that's going to be. And we have no way of proving that or disproving it at this point.
It's really, really unfortunate that this is playing out.
Yeah, and I'm kind of hopeful, which makes me hopeful for Comic Con, which I know is going to be our next big thing that we're going to have all of us out at, which I know we've mentioned before. And there's already been confirmations that Ubisoft will be out there with Star Wars Outlaws, and there's a couple other ones, and specifically with people playing the game either on site or developers there playing it live for the crowd. So it gives me a little bit of hope for certain things. But when we're talking about Summer Games Fest, we have a list of like 40 games just for this, and then we have Ubisoft did like 12 or 14 games, Microsoft did like 20 games. Capcom did a bunch of games. Square Enix did a bunch of games. Like everybody, it was a PC Gamer had like something like 70 different games they showed off, but it was just trailers or the developers talking about the trailer and all that stuff. That's so many titles out there that somebody could just easily go, well, that kind of looks cool and the developer's really hyped about it. Let me throw money at it, not realizing you're getting bamboozled in because it's the PR marketing of it all instead of actually getting to experience it or even getting somebody that hasn't been able to be purchased in the past to experience it and be like, here's my raw, unedited, filtered thoughts on it.
Well, and when you with you mentioning SDCC Comic Con,
Yeah.
I'm worried that with this trend that even the stuff that might be at Comic Con, small outlets like AggroGamer, we might not be able to get into the rooms to view or to interview developers or anything like we did last year.
I'm slightly worried about that, but not as much. And that's only because a lot of the PR people I know, once you talk to them in person, they will do whatever they can to get you set up. And I have all those contacts ready for us to go. So even though like we might be sending emails leading up to that, and they may be like, oh no, we're only gonna let IGN in, or we're only gonna let Kotaku in. Once you can actually be in person and talk to them, that's usually when it changes, which again comes down to because this is the same thing I ran into E3 every year. Ubisoft is a great example of it. Rarely got invited to go see any of their in-person events they did during E3. When I was on the show floor and showed up and talked to the PR person directly, magically out of nowhere, oh yeah, we could slot you in here, or we had a cancellation here, or this here. And it was because you could have that human interaction, and it wasn't just that faceless email or faceless DM or text or whatever. You know, having that social interaction feels like it makes it better. I mean, games are supposed to be social in the first place. So it's like as soon as you remove out that social aspect, you're going to get this curated stuff where it's, you know, that's why I'm not too worried about Comic-Con, to get back to the original point you brought. Because once we can get there and talking to people, usually that goes a little bit smoother.
Kind of massage those relationships with the PR people.
Yeah. Well, again, it's like you're no longer somebody who's just out here to try to swag video games or free shit and all that stuff. They're like, oh, you're actually here to cover it, even though we're not out there with the fedoras and press stickers in the hat, which we might have to do, but doing the whole like 1930s thing or whatever, even though we're not out there, the fact that we show up, we're like, oh yeah, they could see we're excited, we want to see all this stuff. And even though what they're going to show may not be overly exciting for us, you know, like for instance, last year at SDCC, we went to go talk to a bunch of people for Multiverses. I wasn't overly excited about it. I'm not sure if you even knew what it was up until we got the appointment or everything, like specifically, but we still went there. We were excited. We were happy to be there, and we interacted with everybody. We asked questions, all that stuff. And it was like as soon as that happened, it was like a completely different world. As you can see, like, yes, we're excited. We're here to be happy. We want to enjoy these games.
And speaking of multiverses, it was because we were able to go in there and interview and talk to people that I came home. The non video game player that I am, well, I play some, but not a lot. I downloaded and started playing that game and was having a lot of
Mhm.
fun actually playing through some of that.
Yeah, see, and it's other things like that. Like you can go out there and find something you never knew existed or never knew you wanted to experience. But like going out there, like, and we because we interviewed Matthew Lillard and Tara Strong, and I even me sitting there like talking to Matthew Lillard and going, he's the voice of Shaggy. He's not my voice of Shaggy, but he is definitely the voice of Shaggy for the last like 25 years. This is awesome. I still want to kind of like, even though it's not my game, I still want to go in and do this because he got me excited, being in person. Whereas if I'm watching a trailer of him being like, yeah, be excited, I'm going to do the voice. I'm like, all right, yeah, whatever. That's just PR marketing. They're using his face or whatever.
Well, and the same with, was it Arkham Knights?
Gotham Knights.
Gotham Knights. Yeah. Welcome to the AggroCast. This is Ray Bruels with David Hades Becker. Today we are talking about Summer Games Fest. So, David, what the hell is this thing?
Summer Game Fest. It is so it's a project Jeff Keighley has done in the past, and it was usually one of those little hype up teasers when we were coming up to like E3, because he would get it was carryover from the Game Awards he would do, whereas he would get a couple exclusive things here, but it was more or less it was a hype machine to go, here's why you need to go to E3 or you need to go to this huge gaming event that one of the other publishers or developers is doing, and that's what it started out to be. Now for this year, it has been literally day one of not E3 become a like I think they showed 40 plus games during this live stream they did for about 2.5 hours
Damn.
that they streamed it on Twitch, YouTube, everything else. And it was to show off some world premieres and show off some stuff. But on top of that, it was also to get you hyped for all of the other gaming streams that every other developer and publisher was also going to do, since there was no in-person E3 this year.
So it sounds like there was a ton of content.
Yes, there was, and like so, the whole thing started off with something I know a lot of people didn't not realize, but didn't expect, because almost a couple of days before we heard there was a cancel, or not a cancellation, but a postponement of a new Prince of Persia game, because they were doing a remake of Prince of Persia: Sands of Time, and the whole show started off with Prince of Persia: Lost Crown, which is a whole new entry into this franchise, and it's taking a whole bunch of elements from all sorts of other games. So it's interesting that they started with that, even though the other one was kind of put on a permanent hiatus. And then they moved into like Mortal Kombat 1. Dead by Daylight showed off. Nicolas Cage is going to be in there, and they actually had Nicolas Cage on stage to talk about it. They hyped up The Witcher season 3, even though I could have swore Henry Cavill was done with it all, but like they featured him front and center, so maybe that's their off sending for him as the character.
My understanding was this was going to be the last season for him, and then it was switching over to Liam Hemsworth.
Gotcha. Okay, which is probably why they featured him so heavily in the trailer. Because after that, it was interesting. They went from Witcher to Witchfire, which is an interesting medieval magic shooter, which I've been excited for, and I've been covering it quite a bit on the site itself. It feels like BioShock if it was set during a medieval witch period. It's cool. Then there's Sonic Superstars, which is more or less a full remake or remaster of the original games in a 3D space. So it's, even though it's a 2D side scroller for a Sonic game, it was a full like 3D perception on all the characters. They showed off more of Lies of P, which is the new, unfortunately, Death Souls like Pinocchio game that in like a cool steampunk Victorian age. It looks so cool.
That sounds pretty awesome.
But unfortunately, it's going to be like Bloodborne, where it sounds awesome, visuals are awesome. I've played the demo. It's a Souls like through and through, and oh, I hate that fucking game mechanic.
Yeah, I love